Welcome back to the Football Fitness Federation podcast. This is episode 343. I'm very excited for this episode. As anyone watching on video will see, I've got three fine young gentlemen sat in front of me, all from San Diego Football Club. And we're going to get into that into a little bit. But I'm going to start off getting them to introduce themselves, and they're going to give a little bit of background on themselves, but also their roles at the club as well. So, Luke, I'm going to start with yourself. I know you're looking around trying to pass it on to the lads. You're going to start with yourself, mate.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much for the introduction, and I don't feel young anymore. I can tell you that for certain. Luke Jenkinson. My official title is the head of human performance here at San Diego Football Club. So I spearhead what we would call the human performance department, which includes sports science, medicine, nutrition, psychology, and we'll also say data insights, but that's from shall we say, a non-tactical and technical perspective. And along with these two gentlemen to my right, basically spearhead the human performance department here at San Diego. So I was previously, as you can tell from my accent, I'm certainly not American, that's for certain. So I was with Sheffield United in the academy for almost 7 years, and then was at Derby County for just over 6 years, where I originally started working with the academy and then became the head of performance over those 6 years, which was where I basically was working with Wayne Rooney as a player, and then when he became head coach, and then he offered me the opportunity to come over to the US at the end of 2022. So I moved over to DC United, so on the East Coast of the United States in the MLS, with him and the assistant manager, Pete Shuttleworth. I spent 2 seasons with DC United as the head of performance, and then made the move officially over to the another 2,000 miles away from home and another 3 time zones at the sort of end of the regular MLS season last year in the middle of October. So officially been with the organisation for coming on a year though now, but as I say, made the move at the end of last season.
We were just saying before we started recording that Casper Thornton was on the podcast, episode 317. I think it was November time last year, and he sort of talked about the project at San Diego. He spoke about maybe having someone appointed, but didn't mention any names. That was obviously yourself at the time, Luke. I was also thinking about the first time I think we maybe met, and I saw met you in person for the first time. Don't know if you remember this, but do you remember the Rob Pacey held an event at Sheffield United? It was probably the hottest day that the UK has ever had.
Yeah.
And that was
a lot. So myself, Paul Bauer, who's now at Montreal, and Pacey, before this, we don't know what year it was, maybe 2012, we think it was. But we just wanted to try and get like-minded practitioners in the canteen at Shirecliffe at Sheffield United, the hottest place on earth. No aircon. We threw some orange cordial and apple and blackcurrant out at people. And that was basically try and just talk to like-minded people before the worlds of podcasts and YouTube. Well, it was a bit pre-YouTube, but before it became a thing, we're not that old. Yeah. There was a lot of people reflect back on that evening, and I've actually got the infographic that we put together for that and the advertisement. But a wild time to think that was 13 years ago now, is going back to me not being a young pup anymore.
Yoeri, this is your hat-trick performance, by the way. Unfortunately, I don't have a match ball for you, but do you want to give a little intro to yourself, mate?
Little disappointed there on the match ball, I'm not gonna lie. Yoeri Pegel, currently the head of physical development for San Diego FC. Also, I believe Luke's first hire at San Diego FC.
That's correct.
So I can always rely on that one. I came from Amsterdam, Ajax, as the head of strength. That's where I got to know Casper. Applied for the role here, and I've since moved 9 time zones over towards the West Coast.
Awesome. Ryan, yourself?
Yeah, so my role here is the head of medical at San Diego. I'm an athletic trainer by trade, so I've been practicing for about a decade. When I finished school, I started out in college football, but after probably 3 or 4 years, I kind of determined that was not going to be sustainable for me. I think it takes a certain kind of person to be able to handle that stress year after year. So I grew up playing soccer. I figured if I was going to do this work, I would do it in a sport that I love to do. And so from there, I started working at University of Maryland with their college soccer program, and got to know some of the people at DC United pretty closely just from being in that community. And then about 4 or 5 years ago, made the move over to DC United and got my feet wet in the professional world. And then was excited to be able to start here. I don't think I was the second hire. I think I was closer to the second to last hire for Luke. But no, nonetheless, yeah, excited to be here.
Awesome, lads. I appreciate that. Luke, I wanted to get you to give the listeners a little bit of context around the club, because anyone that listens to the episode with Casper will probably understand why this episode is going to be so different, how new the club is. But do you want to just give a little bit of background on the club to start with?
Yeah, so I suppose San Diego FC, the 30th MLS franchise here in the US, and the club was officially 2 years old last week, but of course we're only 15 games into the season in terms of our journey. So the club's owned 50% by Right to Dream, who Casper gave a lot of background in a very, very interesting organization, and one that I originally came across, I think 2009, 2010, actually at the Milk Cup when I was with Sheffield United, and we played against Right to Dream, and was an organization that I knew of in terms of doing things a little bit differently across Europe, especially in terms of a multi-academy opposed to a multi-club model. And then not only is that unique in a European market, but absolutely changing the market here in the USA, and developing an academy system here that would be akin to what we would expect of a Cat 1 academy back in England. There's a pay-to-play model in the long-term athletic development model here in the US, and it's much more of a financial market opposed to a talent identification market. And we are shaking things up as a market. By giving our players that 12 years old a 6-year contract, full schooling, full residential, and we're in a really unique geographical position. So Mexico is literally just 20 minutes over my left shoulder here. So we're able to recruit across the border into Tijuana. And yeah, so the other half of the club is owned by Sequan. So the Sequan are a Native American tribe that are based here over in El Cajon on the east side of San Diego, and basically we're the only major league sporting team that's on reservation land. So the land that we are on here is sacred land, and it's an extremely beautiful and extremely special place to come to work. And we don't take for granted that this land has been gifted for us to be on, to develop the next generation of hopefully local talent, but also for those initial indigenous people of this land.
Brilliant. Yeah, I've seen some of the videos of some of the facilities you guys have got as well, and it's absolutely top class. I want to talk about the start and the team coming together. Obviously, not just playing staff, but also coaching staff as well. Yoeri, Ryan, I'd love to get your perspectives on this. So what was some of the initial, obviously you guys have created the staff, you've come together as a staff. What were some of the initial steps in terms of creating some chemistry? We'll start on the staff side and then we can maybe lean into players. Chemistry between the staff, because obviously there was nothing there originally, and staff members have obviously been added to the team. So Yoeri, what was like the initial steps for yourself, getting to know other people, getting to know the staff, getting to work together? How was that for you?
Yeah, I think it started off, and I'll have to reroute here towards Luke and Casper's work there. The initial hiring process was quite long. A lot of people were involved, so you already had a pretty good idea of the people that stepped into the organization, what kind of people they were. I'm going to let Luke talk about that in way more greater detail. But the good thing was when everyone stepped into our office building, so we first all started at our headquarters downtown because the training facilities weren't all that finished at that point yet. We basically all stepped foot in there, and you already had a pretty good idea of who the people were when they stepped into the building, and they all slowly started coming in as the hiring processes were completed. And then once we were there, it was just, I want to say, was it 6 weeks or so? Yeah, 6 weeks of just every day being in the same office together, onboarding, talking about philosophy, talking about processes, talking about everything that we would want to do the moment that we first step foot into these grounds that we're on right now. And that was just a lot of time dedicated to getting to know each other as people, getting to know each other within a specific part of the department, the overall football department, making sure that we prioritize all these processes that are so valuable once you get into the weeds of a regular season, where it becomes very difficult to actually manifest some of that, because you're just into the daily ins and outs of what it's like to work in professional football. So we were able to spend those 6 weeks really going in depth into what our department would look like. And I think that's paying off now. If there's anything I'm missing there, gents.
No, I think you speak very much around that professional side of things and getting to know each other as people. We spent a lot of time just breaking bread together and just enjoying the environment together and going to lunch together and going on hikes together and just getting to fundamentally know each other. As Yoeri said, we were looking to recruit good people and not necessarily the star practitioners. Maybe why the three of us are sat here as the star practitioners, but we had to get the right people on the bus. It wasn't to test that theory, but it was to get to understand the nuances and how we all operate as 10 individuals in the human performance department, about how we best operated or how to get the most out of us, and to understand each person's motivations for being here. Because ultimately, as we say, we're sat here with an English guy, a Dutch guy, and an American guy, and we've all come from 9 different time zones that have brought us here to this one training center. But why, and what do we want to get out of this? But ultimately, how can this organization be the vehicle for our development, but the development and setting the foundations for future generations here in San Diego?
And how did that relate over to players, Ryan, as well, in terms of, it's a new playing staff as well, isn't it? So new players have come together, a squad has been created, you then got your coaching staff. How did that relay onto the work with players?
Yeah, so we obviously were able to do a lot of research on the background of players before they arrived. For those that we had signed early, there were a couple that we didn't sign until it was very late, and we were about to start. But just, I think all three of us can agree that until you meet the players in person, you kind of see their personalities and see how they respond to stress and see how they manage themselves. There's only so much you can do to prepare. So it was interesting once we got everybody together. The first kind of like 2 to 3 weeks was maybe like that Spider-Man meme with everyone, where everyone's kind of got their guard up a little bit, and no one wants to make the first mistake, whether it's players or staff. No one wants to be seen as unprofessional. So it did take a couple of weeks for everyone's personalities to kind of really come out. Maybe toward the end of preseason, once everybody got together, because just wanted to present themselves in the best light possible, which is understandable. But on the medical side, we rely, and I'm sure with these guys too, a lot on players' personalities and how they respond to certain situations to be able to know how to manage them. And so early on, it was kind of difficult, just making decisions and managing things where you don't really know how everyone's going to respond to different kind of situations. So it definitely, once we got in the groove and we got to know everyone better, I think it just became a little bit easier for us to manage all the things that we needed to do on a day-to-day basis. And that's not something that I've experienced in the past, just with always having players, you know, the bulk of the team from the year before, and you kind of know how things are going to go. So I think that was kind of the biggest, the biggest, not challenge, because it was enjoyable to get to know everybody, but one of the things we had to consider early on with just getting the players together with the staff.
Like, we have 14 different nationalities of players here, and there is players that have come through the Right to Dream organization, whether that was Ima Boateng in the second cohort of the academy 24 years ago, or whether that's Jeppe Tverskov or Marcus Ingvartsen that have been playing for FC Nordsjælland for a number of years. So there was already some relationships that were already had, and I think Casper spoke about these guardrails. Yes, people spoke about us being this new team, as if we had no history, but yet we have joined an organization that has a real clear, defined history and process. So it was, first of all, realizing that and knowing what we were coming into, that it wasn't completely blind. But as Ryan says, we've got a group of just over 25 players from 14 different nationalities, and getting to know each of these on an individual basis. And of course, there was players whether that's Anders Dreyer that was at Brighton, for example, and he worked with Liam Rossini, who's a good friend of mine, or whether that was Paddy McNair, that if we talk about our championship years and like just building these natural rapports. And it's certainly been an interesting journey so far. But certainly to say that we are now in the 20th week of the season, it doesn't feel like that this is new anymore. And the staff that we've got here, like two of our athletic trainers, so Paulina is from San Diego, like her first language or speaks fluent Spanish, so she's Mexican, and then Bianca speaks 5 languages, which helps for people to be able to speak in their native tongue should they wish to. I never thought a guy from Sheffield would be telling jokes and having a laugh in Spanish. That's for certain.
That's something I was actually going to ask, not about a Yorkshireman speaking Spanish, but about the position that you find yourself in now, Luke. How different it is to moving clubs moving to a different EFL club or all the rest of it. And you've kind of answered it there, that now is a position that you probably feel like the approach that you take going into a new role, regardless of where that would be, is similar. Is that fair to say?
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think it's really important to recognize that each situation is unique, but there's certainly learnings that can be taken from each of those moves. So this is the 4th club that I've worked for now. And ultimately, this comes down to people and program and it being context specific. And what we do here with the resources that we have here and the infrastructure that we have here is slightly different to what that I had available when we were at Derby County and when we were at DC United, and even to the level of the support that I've got with working with me now, and having expertise as full-time psychologists with us, full-time dietitians with us, data scientists within the department. So you've got to understand what's around you. And ultimately, I'm here, and my role as spearheading this department is to make each of the team's journey as efficient and as enjoyable as possible, and to let all the rest of the department thrive fundamentally.
Yoeri, Ryan, I want to put this to you guys. In terms of the attraction from working for San Diego, what were some of the standouts for yourself that draw you into the roles that you're in now?
For me, I'd say that's 90 to 95% related to Right to Dream. The head of performance at Ajax right now is Sam Verga, incredible person, good friend of mine. He came to Ajax from FC Noordjylland, so he was a direct co-worker of Casper during his time there. And through Sam, I got to meet Casper at Ajax, actually had a couple long conversations with him, stayed in touch. And obviously working so closely with Sam, I heard a lot about how Right to Dream operated. Whether that was in Denmark, whether that was in Ghana, Egypt. And there were just certain parts about the philosophy of Right to Dream, how it's about development of people, not necessarily only the players, also the staff, their core values that just really resonated with me. And so when I heard about this project a couple of years ago, it immediately sparked my interest. I had some conversations with Casper about that as well. And then once the role opened up, it was apparent. Like, I immediately had to interview for it, and I'm very lucky to be in this position, because it's exactly what I had heard about it before. So you hear all these things about how an organization operates and how it's, for instance, how it represents the development of people, and then you never know until you're in it. You never know until you see the actual actions that are related to all these words that come out of people's mouths. And then all that you see is people getting internally promoted. All you see is people actually developing and saying the same things. You're talking to people that don't know that you're also talking to them, that work in the same organization. And it's like you hear the same stories, you see the same actions being happening over time. And I come here, and everything that I've heard about, everything that I've seen, it works the same way here. And so that's just really, really awesome.
Yeah, I'll ditto everything Yoeri said with Right to Dream. I think if you're not part of a wider group, you can become kind of isolated. And I spent a lot of time over the past several years just kind of coming up with my own philosophies. So it was nice to be able to step in and begin to integrate into the medical side with Right to Dream, and just get some feedback and see kind of some different ways of doing things, so that I can adjust and I can grow. The other piece was Luke and I had worked pretty extensively together at DC, and we had solved a lot of issues together and got to know each other pretty well. So for me, stepping into a role where I kind of knew what the expectations were for me from someone who was supervising was a place where I felt like I could definitely kind of flourish and grow a little bit more. And then it's always exciting to be able to start from scratch. So not have any kind of history or habits in a group that you have to overcome when you try to build something new. I think everyone can get excited about the fact that you have a blank canvas to kind of paint on, if you will. So that was another attractive piece, I think, for coming here.
I was going to ask about some of the initial systems that you guys put in place, but just before we go into that, did that make those decisions on those initial systems that you were going to put in place? Did it make it easier with the fact of Right to Dream's vision, the approach that they take? Does it make it easier to go, right, we are coming to the club for this reason because Right to Dream do exactly what you've just been speaking about, and now we know that X, Y, and Z is the initial approach that we need to take with this group of staff or players?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it was there's multiple multi-club models out there that still talk about being multi-club models that are still siloed and still aren't all pulling in the same direction. I think that we have a very clear vision all the way across the organization, and that we appreciate, and to use that analogy, there's guardrails for how we operate. But fundamentally, that best practice document, we're just in the process of reviewing as a global Right to Dream leadership group. There's nothing in there that we wouldn't expect. There's nothing wacky out there, but like, as to use Casper's phrase, if you want to be on Bosu balls and do an extensive amount of dry needling, then you're probably not the practitioner for us. And those brilliant basic foundations are part of our athletic development model. And ultimately, we're probably, the three of us are sat here because our philosophies align with that of Right to Dream, that we're not greatly out there. Now, there's definitely nuances here that we have compared to Egypt and compared to Ghana and compared to Denmark, even just from a facilities perspective. And then there's nuances that I have in terms of physical performance that me and Yoeri will have debates about. But fundamentally, we're all definitely pulling in the rough same direction. And as Ryan said, like having practitioners and being part of a performance and medical department or a human performance department on a global scale, having 70, 75 practitioners and a dietitian here, being able to speak to the nutritionist over in Denmark and to share ideas, and for Ryan to speak to Matt DeLange, who's the head of medical at FCN, who's actually from not too far away from where Ryan is in Detroit. So yeah, it's very advantageous.
So in terms of those initial systems or just the initial approach that you took with the programming, what were some of the key things that you needed to prioritize?
So I think what was, again, a really unique situation is often when you have a human performance department, and as Ryan mentioned, you come into an organization that has a way of working, or there's real defined roles and responsibilities for the practitioners within the department. You almost have A, B, C, D, and E, and D leaves. And there's now a gap of the roles and responsibilities or actions or skill set of employee D. So you just need to go and find D. Whereas we were really lucky to just have the whole blank slate, ultimately, like Sophia Chambers, who's our performance coach here that previously was with Inter Miami. She didn't apply for the role that she's in, and the role that she's in wasn't ever a role that was advertised, but we saw a skill set and a person that we were like, we need her in this organization. And we joke that I was literally just at home and had this light bulb moment and was like, how about if she could do this within our program because of the skill sets of Yoeri, because of the skill sets of Walter and Chris, our S&C coach and our data scientist, and how did this complement one another? And once we had the department in place, or the employees in place, we had to, one, further assess their strengths, also their weaknesses, to potentially hide some of those weaknesses and work on developing those as practitioners, and then to understand what does the program look like. So I spent a lot of time before even Yoeri and Ryan were employed at the club with our head coach, just figuring out what does a week look like, what does our microcycle look like, what's the expectations of the program, along with our sporting director Tyler Heaps and our VP of Soccer Ops Joe Jessa. We spent a lot of time in a boardroom discussing these things. And then once we had an idea of what the program looked like and how we wanted to operate, it's probably the most planned I've ever seen in my life, right from day one. So the 9th of January for the medical days, but then also the planning that we have through the season and the level of communication. And I think that was one because we had the time leading into the season, but also just how the human performance department, the technical tactical staff, and the sporting director works and operates. We're a fairly young staff and very much very meticulous in terms of planning. So I think we complement each other really well. And then from the human performance department, myself and Yoeri sat down to talk about the performance staff and created a RACI matrix for what our expectations were. So who was going to be responsible, who was going to be accountable, who was going to be consulted, and who was going to be informed from all the things that may come up on a day-to-day basis. And then myself and Ryan did that with the medical department. And then the onboarding of our staff was a critical period. So each of those staff were made aware of that RACI matrix, that they would be reviewed, that this wasn't a hard and fast, you're getting told what you're going to be doing, but for each of the members of the team to have real clear roles and responsibilities, or what the expectations were, because they weren't coming into anything where we had a history. So each of the members had a real strong Right to Dream onboarding, San Diego FC onboarding, and human performance department onboarding. And on day one, each of those team members came in and were given 3 large projects to be working on. And there was pretty distinct clarity of where we were working. But that has changed. And I think the one thing that we've done well is that we've been open to change and open to review, and we understand that things aren't solidified yet. And yeah, we've had a high level of a formal one-to-one. So as I say, we're week 20 of the season, and we're already 3 one-to-ones in with our staff alongside of our informal meetings. And that has just been because we need to check and test all of our processes, and they are constantly developing. And part of the targets for year 1 is just to understand and get to know each other and start to solidify and get into a flow. Ryan touched upon, we had a lot of firsts, and we're over the big firsts now at week 20 into the season, but who knows what we might be blindsided by. And we discussed that we could have spent even longer planning. My reflection has been that I could have only planned for so much with Casper, because there's things that we just wouldn't have expected. And at no point, and particularly from my perspective, would I have ever thought I was sat in meetings regarding California medical policies and healthcare deals, and just stuff that we had to learn on the spot and deal with ultimately.
How beneficial has that been for you, lads, to have this such clear vision for yourselves in your roles, to say, right, this is your responsibilities, this is what you're going to be responsible for, and it's going to come back on you? Like, does that give you real clarity in your roles and what the sort of approach that you take?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the fine balance is between having that clear responsibility and knowing what's expected of you on a day-to-day basis, while also having freedom to operate in, to be able to make certain decisions within your line of responsibilities, to have that freedom. And I think the beautiful part about having those 6 weeks leading into it, and also before that, having a lot of discussions with, for instance, Casper and Luke, and I'm talking about myself here in this case, is that there was a lot of clarity. There was a lot of clarity about, what Luke's role is, what my role is, what, of course, Ryan's role is, and then how that trickles down towards the end of the rest of the department. And so only speaking from my personal experiences, that has been incredible, because you will come across a lot of organizations where everyone's basically, and I'm going back to Ryan's impersonation of the Spider-Man meme, where everyone's just pointing at each other like, I don't know what I have to do, you don't know what you have to do, and we definitely don't know what to expect of the other person, when to communicate, who to communicate it to, what those lines are, and I think that's just quite common. And I think almost everyone within professional football knows that that's quite common, but it isn't something that should necessarily be expected. And it definitely shouldn't be something that we should all be okay with. And the one big difference that I've felt here is that that's absolutely not the case. Communication lines to me have always been extremely clear, responsibilities have been clear, and that just makes it so much easier to just go out day in, day out and try to do your job to the best of your abilities.
Anything to add on that, Ryan?
Yeah, no, I think these two covered it pretty well. I would say that while we definitely have a lot of structure here, there definitely was room left for everyone to take advantage of their strengths and add kind of their unique qualities so that they weren't put into a box. We've adjusted things a little bit as we've gone, just based on what people's interests are, what people's strengths are, where maybe there was a need that we didn't anticipate they needed to be filled. So just having that kind of fluidity to be able to adapt and put people in positions where they can kind of be their best selves it's been a good balance.
Well, just to go back to that point and about speaking of how to Right to Dream works around development, I think that's one of the beautiful things here is that Luke and Casper, they're so open to people having, they would say, less exposure to certain skill sets and not having developed those skill sets, but having the desire to develop those skill sets for the future and to obviously put them in a place where they can be successful within their role currently, but also to find ways to develop them and expose them to some of these skill sets that they might want to have mastered sometime in the future, or we need them to have mastered in the future. To find moments where they can allow us to be exposed to some of that stuff, I think that's a brilliant balance here that Casper and Luke both constantly keep talking about.
And we wanted highly motivated people. Like that was the minimum, and we wanted to get the right people on the bus for two reasons, because having the right people on the bus gives us the opportunity to get to the destination happy, but it also means that if you put the wrong person on the bus, the good people get off the bus. So that was first and foremost, and we had to develop a sense of, and as you can probably hear, we all do, but a sense of pride in Right to Dream. And we look at some of the most successful organizations in any walk of business. They have either a sense of pride in their organization or a sense of pride in their product. And that was what I was really conscious that we had to ensure we developed and were really, really overtly aware of. And I think the work, again, of Mikey Varas, our head coach, and Tyler Heaps, our sporting director, was we felt connected very quickly. And again, I think that is part of the broader organization, but the work that we did, it was very conscious, it was very purposeful. But yeah.
I found it fascinating when the names were announced of you guys all coming together, Luke first, and then Yoeri joining the team, and Walter, and people that
Exactly.
we've had on the podcast. If we stay on the superhero theme, it was like the Avengers assembling, wasn't it?
It was a cool process to be part of. Me and Casper interviewed a lot. We did well over 100 hours of interviews, and we had over 3,000 applicants, which, if you think about it, that's like the biggest high school or secondary school for our English listeners. I apologize. And then it came down to 10 and 11 of us. And we were in a very fortunate position that the organization attracted some very good people and some very good practitioners. But it was a long, tiring process, but one that I will never forget. It was a very rewarding project to be a part of, and again, a very unique one. And Nick Cox, I worked with at Sheffield United, used to always say, like, this club's been around for 125 years. It'll be around for another 125 years. Just look after your corner and develop your corner. And it was mad for, especially as an English guy, to be going, wow, this is day one of a football club. And we are very much a football club in a soccer market. The plan is to leave our legacy here, and one day unfortunately, we will move on in whatever circumstance that is. But no one will ever be able to take away the emotional connection as staff, as players, to that first win against the champions up the I-5 in LA at Galaxy. It will certainly be a day that we will never forget, and one where we will be forever connected.
I think I spoke with Casper about this when we did our podcast, and I've definitely had a fair few conversations around this. I feel like you've answered it to a point in terms of looking for certain traits within practitioners and who goes into certain roles. But staff size, Luke, and how many people that we take on board, people have different experiences with this. Obviously, there's bigger departments, there's small departments. When we were talking before about the different responsibilities, I can hear people at EFL clubs where there's only one of one going, well, I do that, and that. They must have a slightly different approach. But did that come to mind for yourself where you were like, okay, these are the roles we need filling, but I don't want to go to this number. I want to keep it within this number. Did that become a thought process?
Yeah, so the staffing structure was already, what's interesting in the MLS, there's actually only 5 mandated positions from a performance and medical department. So we're double that. The way when I was speaking to a lot of people that were ringing me and connecting with me about positions here was, I think it's almost like this inverted U, that you have this sweet spot and I've been at points where, and I've got friends and colleagues that are back in England where, as you say, are doing everything, and they're only just able to keep the ship afloat, never mind move the ship forward. But yeah, I've also got friends and colleagues that have been at Let's Go Premier League clubs that feel so siloed and feel part of such a small defined role that they, as coaches, we're there to make interventions and we're there to support and help that process. It's like just one tiny part of an Amazon warehouse in terms of on that conveyor belt, that they feel that they're not actually adding value to the greater process. So I definitely feel like that we have this sweet spot. So again, there's myself as the head of human performance, the 2 gentlemen sat next to me, spearheading the performance and medical departments. We have an S&C coach that is predominantly gym-based. So he he's been in San Diego for 17 years, comes from a naval background. We asked him if he liked working with small groups, big groups, or medium groups, and he said small groups. We asked him how many that was, and he said like 40 to 70 people. So he comes from a completely different background. As you mentioned, Walter Grandes, who's our data scientist here within the human performance department. Sophia Chambers is a performance coach. We then have a full-time nutritionist, full-time psych or mental performance coach, as it's called here in the US, full-time physiotherapist, 2 athletic trainers, with an additional athletic trainer joining us, which is very common through our healthcare partners, Sharp Healthcare, who were the largest healthcare provider here in the local market of San Diego, and then which is different to the UK as well. Our doctors are part-time. The US market doesn't have full-time doctors in clubs. So I was part of that process of recruiting and finding dental partners, healthcare partners. Sat down having conversations with doctors in the US and trying to manage that. And it was actually something that we discussed quite a lot in one of my interview stages with Casper about how to manage that and how that's different from a European market.
Brilliant. You've talked about the traits and the fact that you're looking for ambitious people. Let's take away the coaches, ambitious people. Is there anything else that sort of jumped out for you in the hiring process of the practitioners that you've got on board, taking away the sort of technical side, looking more at the person now?
Yeah, again, there definitely had to be cultural alignment in terms of, or cultural and philosophical alignment. Again, what you'll find here in the USA, there's almost like different styles of clubs. So, shall we say, heavily American dominant, European dominant, or South American dominant, or Latino dominant. In terms of, it was people that were able to be, the one thing that we found that people were really poor at was having really good self-reflective practice of understanding where they are in their journey, what their strengths are, but also where they potentially fall short and how they've worked upon these, or what are their strategies that they've taken to develop these. I think that there's people that had high level of experiences, but weren't aware. And maybe that's the interview process. And we were also cognizant of this, that we had to try and establish this through interviewing and several stages of interview, because who wants to come in an interview and go, I'm not very good at this, I'm not great at this, I can't do this, but I'm really good at this. But we found that actually that was a really important time. Yoeri, for example, like his original degree was business. He'd not worked on field predominantly prior, but he was really clear about that and what he needed to do to make those steps, what support he would need to make that jump. And I'd say that was the biggest thing. Reflective practice and being self-aware were the two largest elements that we looked for, along with high levels of motivation. And to also the right levels of motivation. San Diego is an extremely attractive proposition of somewhere to come and live and somewhere to base yourself. It's a very expensive market to be in, but to actually really to dig deeper to why people wanted to join the organization and what did they know about the organization. And as we've mentioned, we were all deeply connected and had an understanding of Right to Dream and a story with Right to Dream, and who actually felt that, believed it, who was about harnessing future talent here, who was about long-term development, who was, as Yoeri said, about developing players and people. So yeah, it was, I wouldn't say a process of becoming blinded by having like-minded people, but having people that were, again, similar in terms of their motivations as practitioners and people.
And Ryan, for yourself, I know having previously worked with Luke, you would have known him, but when other practitioners were coming into the club, was that quite obvious that there was similarities between yourselves and the others?
Sorry, can you rephrase the question?
Yeah, I just mean, so from your experience, you obviously knew Luke before, but when you saw the likes of Yoeri and others coming into the club, we've talked about there the traits and the reasons why you were hired at the club. Was it quite obvious that others were in a similar position and had similar traits maybe to yourself?
Yeah, definitely. I was in kind of a unique position where my staff had been hired before me. So I got to know them more kind of through our early office days opposed to during the interview process. And then I think, like I said earlier, you really don't fully know the people in this profession that you're working with until you're kind of in it. And so we had that period of 6 weeks where we all had almost an office job and we got to know each other personally in that way. And I saw just very high levels of motivation and excitement around just preparing for the project. And then I think with each individual that we work with, we kind of saw another layer of them coming out of their shell once we got put in this environment, the environment where kind of we all thrive, the reason that we do this. And so I think that those traits became even more evident once we started rolling in preseason win and we had the challenges of the first preseason trip, the first match, the first away match, where over time, definitely those traits became even more evident as we all got to do what we are actually here to do.
It was almost like the FIFA, I don't know what it's called, Ultimate Team, where you're trying to get the green lines and the chemistry between the staff. And like there was some staff here that sort of knew one another as well prior to, or professionally knew one another prior to working here and had connections, whether like, so Sophia, our performance coach, knew Bianca. They had spent some time together working with Dave Tenney over at Austin, for example. I had previous discussions with Walter, just from a professional perspective. I didn't know Yoeri, but he came very highly recommended from multiple people that I trusted, and we sort of knew that we were developing something where we're going to spend a lot of time together. We're going to, as I say, we've all moved from every corner of the world, so it's not like we're in where we were born and raised and we've got families here necessarily, and that we just wanted to embrace this journey together ultimately. And it's I think we've done a pretty good job so far. And we've only Not really had a major test yet. There's been little ones. For example, we're second in the Western Conference at the moment. We started off really well. We lost 3 games back to back. We then won 3 games straight after, and coming to work culturally from an environment, it felt no different when we lost 3 games to when we won 3 games back to back, for example. So there's been little tests so far and little challenges, but we'll continue to check and assess as we move forwards.
It's really interesting, and I appreciate you all giving a bit of an insight, because I think from obviously seeing the club created essentially, but hearing about some of the challenges you face, there's a lot of crossover to clubs that have been around for a number of years, isn't there? So it's really, really interesting. I'm sure the listeners can take away a lot from going into their positions, maybe going into new positions for the future as well. So I just want to say a big thank you, lads. Thank you very much for freeing up the time and coming on. It's been brilliant to have you on. And yeah, best of luck for the rest of the season.
Not a problem at all. Our business day starts in 10 minutes. So you go and enjoy your afternoon and a nice off-season break. And we're just coming up to the midpoint of the season. So yeah, our day starts it's 7:20 a.m. for us right here. So, but no, thank you very much for your time, Ben. It's been a pleasure and almost nice to close off that circle with Casper's pre and now as a little bit post. And yeah, it'll be interesting to see where we are in 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, 125 years.
Brilliant. Thanks, lads.
Thank you very much.